evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Lame duck President Barack Obama attempted to salvage his political legacy today with a stop by the Capitol. His mission? Fighting the repeal of his eponymous health care law. He urged Democrats not to rescue Republicans when they try to pass a replacement to it and to brand any new law as Trump care. Democrats seem to embrace that strategy. The stage is now set for yet another fiery health care debate. Take a look at part of it.
But the first order of business is to repeal and replace Obamacare.
We're here today to warn the American people that the Republican plan to cut Medicare, Medicaid, repeal the ACA will make America sick again.
This law has failed. Americans are struggling. The law is failing while we speak. We need to reverse the damage that has been done.
In this case, all politics is personal.
We're going to work hard every day, not just to repeal Obamacare, but to replace it with reforms that actually put patients back in charge of their health care decisions.
We're going to keep our promise to the American people, and we're going to repeal Obamacare.
The Republicans say repeal and replace. The only thing that has going for it is alliteration.
Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut was in that meeting with President Obama, and he joins us now from the Russell Rotunda over at the Capitol. Congressman, thanks a lot for joining us.
Hi, Tucker. How are you?
I'm great. So, I mean, just a macro question here. I understand that this is the president's signature achievement as president, has his name on it. And there are probably some things about it that we could all agree are fine. But basically, it's a flawed piece of legislation that the public has never fully embraced. Why are Democrats defending it as vigorously as they are?
Well, you know, at some level, it has nothing to do with the politics. I mean, you said the public has never embraced it, and you're right. It's always sort of been 50-50 here and there. But the fact of the matter is that when you talk about the various elements of it, like you don't get turned away if you have a pre-existing condition, the fact that, you know, in my own state, the coverage rates have gone way, way, way up. The idea, 70% of Americans supporting the fact that your kids can stay on your insurance till you're 26. If you list the 5 or 6 things that are core to Obamacare, people love it. The problem is, of course, for 7 years they've been told it's evil as Obamacare and whatnot. And so now the Republicans find themselves in the position of having to navigate that paradox.
Is that really your argument, that people don't love it because they've been lied to? I mean, people are experiencing Obamacare, and you haven't gotten the law has not gotten the costs under control. You've conceded that to your own constituents. I just watched a tape of you admitting that. That was the core promise of Obamacare. We're going to get health care costs under control, and it didn't do it. So why not just admit that?
So that wasn't the core promise of Obamacare. The core promise of Obamacare was that for the first time in a very long, for the first time ever, the United States would have the ability to cover all of its people. And I will reiterate what I've said. No one, including under Obamacare, has managed to get the cost of the industry under control the way we would like to. But at the end of the day, look, this isn't about who says what or who's, and there, yes, there was a lot of lying, but the fact of the matter is you've got 20 or 30 million Americans out there who have insurance that didn't have it before. You've got seniors who are paying less for their drugs. So, you know, this idea that somehow this thing is a massive failure, that it's crumbling of its own weight, is something that is a bumper sticker that most Americans, and this will be the test, when most Americans, if there is a repeal and no replace, and they realize, oh my God, look at what just happened, they will be infuriated. And this, of course, is why we're hearing from Rand Paul, and, you know, that we can't do repeal, we've got to talk about replace.
Okay. I understand you've got a lot vested in this. You voted for it. I'm sure you agree with lots of parts of it. All of that is fine. But you're making a nonsensical argument. You're saying that the public loves Obamacare, but you're also conceding that they don't actually love Obamacare because it's never really gotten above 50%. A law that has transformed the life of every person in this country does not have majority support nationally. That is itself a failure, isn't it? And by the way, why don't they love it if it's so great? I don't understand.
Well, look, it's a very complicated thing, and part of the reason they don't love it is because the conservative right wing started out, and you used the word lie, but they started out with death panels. Okay, there were going to be panels that decided whether grandma lived or died, right? And every single moment, in states that if they had in fact expanded Medicaid, very poor states like Mississippi and Alabama, if they'd expanded Medicaid, they'd have much healthier populations. They didn't do that, so there are people in those states who should have the benefit of it, who haven't haven't experienced it. But I promise you this, Tucker, and look, public perception goes here or there, and it'll move around something as complicated as health care. It's not surprising that it's not up at 70 or 80% approval, but they have been lied to. They were told about death panels.
I mean, look, you're a smart guy. You were in business before you went to Congress. Do you really believe that because conservative websites criticized Obamacare, or Sarah Palin used the term death panels, that lo these many years after its passage, Americans are still ignoring their own best interests and saying they don't like it just because they believe Sarah Palin from 7 years ago? I mean, you don't really believe that, do you? 1/3 of counties in America have only one insurance provider. That's not a win, is it?
I'm not making the argument, and I wouldn't make the argument, I've never made the argument that Obamacare was perfect. We're talking about a massively complicated thing here. So yes, there is some instability in the exchanges out there. There have been areas in small businesses and other areas where premiums have gone up more than we would have liked. But look, you cannot argue with the fact that every senior on Medicare out there is now paying less for their drugs, that the donut hole is closing. Again, 20 or 30 million Americans, the number's 20 million of people who now have coverage that don't. Those are facts that look, we don't need to argue about this, because if the Republicans repeal this thing without a replacement, you are going to see an uprising, you're going to see anger, and we'll be talking, 2 months from now about, my God, what did they just do?
Okay, so in other words, it's on the Republicans now, and you may be right. I mean, the Republicans now run everything, or they will at the end of this month. But you're not telling the entire truth about the costs here. So the costs fall disproportionately on the young and healthy. Has it occurred to you that that is the poorest segment of our society? Look at any chart. The poorest people are the youngest, the richest people are the oldest. Obamacare shifts the cost from the young and the healthy, there's the chart right there, to the old and the sick. It is the most regressive possible way to pay for anything, and as a Democrat who believes in helping the needy, I'm surprised you would support something like that.
Well, actually, I think you've got it exactly backward. As you know, the poor and the elderly are precisely the populations that are covered by Medicaid and Medicare, respectively. Programs that are highly popular.
Right. But by the way, that's, I guess, another obvious question, which is those programs are very popular. You've never explained why Obamacare is not as popular as Medicare and Medicaid. But anyway, the truth is Obamacare is entering a death spiral in a lot of states precisely because young people have decided it's not in their interest to sign up for it. So that's just a very basic problem, but it's also revealing of the basic unfairness. The poorest people are paying for the richest people to get health care.
Well, again, you're just dead wrong about that. The only people who are paying more under Obamacare are the people with incomes over $250,000 who saw a little bit of an uptick on the Medicare payments that they have to make on their passive income, on their interest on their dividends. So you've got it exactly backward. But let's go back to young people, because I think they're really core. Okay, young people, you hate the mandate. The Republicans hate the mandate. I get that. I don't like the idea that the government tells me I don't like the idea that the government tells me what I have to do. But look, the idea that a young person who's immortal, look, I was 23 once too, and I was immortal. But what happens when I get hit by a bus and I'm not insured? You and I both know what happens, which is that you and I, with health care plans, pay for that immortal 23-year-old to get treated in a hospital. So this idea, the core of what people hate at the mandate is about personal responsibility.
It's about personal responsibility.
It's about personal responsibility.
You know what? That's a deeply, with respect, disingenuous thing for you to say. As the father of a 22-year-old, I can tell you, my child would be happy to buy catastrophic care coverage for that incident you refer to, and yet my kids have to buy, we all do, coverage that includes pregnancy and maternity care, breastfeeding coverage, birth control coverage. Why can't my children, who don't make much money, buy catastrophic care coverage, the coverage they want? Because they're subsidizing other people. That's why.
Okay.
And you know that's
well, let me answer that question with a question to you. You're a 22-year-old who would like a catastrophic plan with no coverage for pregnancy or for breastfeeding. Is it possible, Tucker, that your 22-year-old might someday, I don't know if your 22-year-old's a man or a woman, but might have a child? Is that possible?
Probably unlikely that my son will have to pay for his breastfeeding, but look, my point is, leaving aside my own children...
That's disingenuous, Tucker. He may not have to breastfeed, but his wife will. Come on.
Please, look, your argument is that young people are not likely to get sick. True, but it's possible they will, some sort of tragedy will befall them and will be stuck with the cost. So why shouldn't they be able to buy insurance against that? And the answer is that a bunch of lobbyists here in D.C., where I live, and I know how this works, got in there and said, no, cover the service I represent, cover the company I represent. This was a trough. A ton of people got rich on it, and it shafted young people who don't have any money. As you know, that's why they're not buying cars, they're not buying houses, they're not getting married. And part of the problem is Obamacare, and you know that.
No, Tucker, what I know is two things. I know, and you should know, how the insurance industry works. I have never had a car accident in my 30-some years of driving, and yet I pay my car insurance premiums. Maybe I shouldn't pay for insurance because I don't have car accidents. So your argument is actually disingenuous. Number two, young people, you're saying they're poor, they don't have the money to do it. As you know, if they don't have the money to do it, they get subsidies. They get subsidies to help them buy plans. That's a big part of Obamacare.
But why can't they just buy catastrophic plans that suit their needs? Because they're subsidizing other people who lobbied you and every other member of Congress, all the Democrats, with money to include all this stuff that they don't need. And you know that's true.
Well, how about this? Let's agree on this. So you said your 22-year-old son should not have to pay for maternity care or for the possibility that he may choose to have a child someday. How about if I introduce an amendment that says we'll cut his premiums if he signs a paper that says I will never have children? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of solution that you may come up with, actually. The government telling you how many kids you can have and under what circumstances. How about this?
Oh, yeah,
Let's just let him do what he
where
wants.
We're going,
we
Tucker.
might all benefit, I can tell.
That's
Congressman,
where we're
thanks
going.
a lot thanks for your game attempt. I appreciate it.
All
Good
right.
to see you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, President-elect Donald Trump spent the day in New York City, and that, amazingly, is also where our correspondent Peter Ducey spent his day. He's live outside Trump Tower tonight. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Tucker, the heads of the intelligence agencies that the president-elect says he does not blindly trust are on their way here to Trump Tower for a briefing on Friday. America's top spies are going to bring the evidence they have that makes them so sure it was Russia and not somebody else meddling with the U.S. electoral process. And some of the names on the guest list for this briefing on Friday include Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, CIA Director John Brennan, and FBI Director James Comey, who many Democrats accuse of interfering in the election himself for making an official update on the Clinton email case just days before people headed to the polls. These officials were announced as briefers even after the president-elect wrote this online, quote, "The intelligence briefing on so-called Russian hacking was delayed until Friday. Perhaps more time needed to build a case. Very strange." And that's not the only thing that should make Friday's briefing very interesting. There's this, too. From Mr. Trump's Twitter account, Julian Assange said a 14-year-old could have hacked Podesta. Why was DNC so careless? Also said Russians did not give him the info. While that's all happening down in D.C., we saw one key member of the Trump team already scoping out the West Wing today. That's soon-to-be counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, spotted by our crew walking into the West Wing for a meeting with Valerie Jarrett. Remember, Valerie Jarrett called the result of the November election soul-crushing, and Conway obviously would have something to do with that because she was the last campaign manager, but Conway told our producer there at the White House that so far, the longtime Obama aide Jarrett has been gracious during the transition. Tucker?
Peter Ducey, live outside Trump Tower, New York. Thanks a lot, Peter. Well, a group of House Republicans came in for some embarrassment yesterday when they tried and failed to gut an independent ethics office. Donald Trump killed that effort in less than a day with two well-armed shots from his .50 caliber Twitter rifle. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume joins us now to explain exactly what happened. Brit, it's great to see you. So all the coverage, as you know, has been hostile to this group of Republicans attempting to do away with an ethics oversight board, in effect. There's another side of the story. You were in Washington for so long. What is the other side of the story?
The other side of the story is that this oversight ethics board really didn't amount to very much at all in the first place. The only official power it really had, Tucker, and it had no subpoena power, so its investigations, to the extent they were investigations, were highly limited, was to make recommendations to the House Ethics Committee, which remains in place. It did, however, have the ability to receive anonymous tips, investigate them in whatever way it could, and then publish them. So that what you had was sort of half-finished, half-baked investigative material being released, of material that might or might not even be the subject of a recommendation to the House Ethics Committee. And this was an operation, I think, that it's fair to say was in bad need of reform because the potential for incomplete investigations was very real, and the potential for abuse in the release of these materials was very real as well. So, and gutting is a sort of a useless word to apply to an outfit that really never had any official power to begin with.
It does sound like some sort of justice panel on a college campus. But I did wonder, just as a matter of appearances, if you're coming in to a new Congress, the 115th, and your first order of business appears to be making the ethics rules lighter on yourself, that was the appearance anyway, probably an unwise thing.
Right. Oh,
So,
in political terms, it was ridiculously poorly timed, clumsy, and in the end, of course, ineffectual. So now we still have this weird sort of unelected body of people who were to advise the House Ethics Committee, and it's still there. And they're going to try to take this on later in the year, having stumbled in the effort to reform it to begin with, which is regrettable all the way around. It was very badly handled. There's no question about that. And, of course, the Trump tweet, which got everybody talking about it, had a lot to do, I think, with the outcome. I mean, I think the public was alarmed. You hear this, and of course, all the reporting said, you know, that this watchdog body, which everybody suddenly imagined they meant, although they may never have heard of it, was very important and very useful. Though, you know, Tucker, you got to ask yourself this question: how much had either of us ever really heard about anything of a consequence that this outfit did before the day before yesterday? And I think the answer, probably in both our cases, is not very much.
No, it does fall somewhat below the
became
Supreme
a big
Court
story, and yeah, it certainly does. And it looked, and of course, it looked terrible. That it was made to appear that they were doing something really, you know, in the dead of night. They were trying to gut the ethics watchdog, which is kind of a ridiculous exaggeration.
So I had lunch the other day with a lobbyist in Washington. The lunch options are limited here, as you know, so you do wind up at lunch with lobbyists. And I asked him, what does the Congress, what do members think of Trump? And the first thing he said was, this was 2 weeks ago, he said, they're terrified of his Twitter account, that he could marshal all this public attention on them, that they're afraid to run afoul of that. Is that why, and it's clearly true, we see from this, is that why he's keeping his Twitter account, do you think?
I would think so, and you know, you can say what you will about the tone and even the substance of many of his tweets, but it's beyond argument that the use of the Twitter account has not been effective for him. And if you look at the upcoming legislative battles that are ongoing, it will be important to Trump to do a couple of things, and one of them will be to keep, obviously, the Republicans in line in House and Senate. It'll be harder in the Senate, perhaps. It always seems to be, and of course the margin there is much narrower for the Republicans. And it will also be important for him to be able successfully to pressure Democrats, who they will need for, say, to break a filibuster on a Supreme Court nomination. So he's got this dartboard that he's got called Twitter, and he can aim these little missiles at various members and take them on. Now, it doesn't mean he'll win the argument, but it means that he has the power to start the argument and to call attention to all kinds of things. So I think it's interesting that they're afraid of his Twitter account, and I think they're right to be.
Yeah, I think that's right. Laser guy, he worked with Boeing. Britt Hume, who knows more about government and politics than anybody I've ever met. A walking encyclopedia. Thank you, Britt. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker. I'm still barely walking.
Time now for our Twitter storm. It's our nightly forecast of social media's most intense weather patterns. Tonight, a dark cloud of ignorance and elitism is hovering over Hollywood. That's always the forecast there, by the way. A group called Humanity for Progress, formerly called Humanity for Hillary during the campaign, released a video featuring a number of celebrities and semi-celebrities begging Congress to obstruct President-elect Trump's agenda, all of it. Here's part of the video.
Women have been
We need you, and we expect you to have our backs.
To protect our civil liberties and to use your congressional powers
To obstruct.
Obstruct, defeat, anything that violates our core values as diverse Americans.
Signed, the majority.
The majority.
The majority. The majority. The majority.
The majority
of the American people.
It was a little strong to call them celebrities. I didn't recognize many. There was an Episcopal priest in there, not surprisingly. Not everyone on Twitter was a fan of the message, though. Here's part of the response. Einstein and me said this: they should totally continue to lecture Americans on why they should reject Trump because it worked out so well before the election. Carlos tweeted this: these people never stop, do they? Now they want to run the country. Unbelievable, and yet true. Lloyd wrote, these people are seething with elitism and condescension. They're part of the reason Trump was elected. And a man called Rambo Braveheart, probably not his real name, wrote this: does Sally Field and Rosie Perez qualify as celebrities still? Wow, there's a dorm room argument from way back. And finally, Sharon Robert wrote, come on, celebs, you're ruining my good movie memories. Stick to acting. Yes, there's a cost to videos like this. And that's tonight's Twitter storm. Coming up, the WikiLeaks email dump exposed many reporters as partisans, hardened partisans. One of them even admitted he is a pro-Hillary hack. And yet now they're back on the job covering the administration they sought to defeat. Radio show host Chris Plante is here to talk about it, what it means That's next. Also, a professor is calling on Trump to quit Twitter entirely, but not for the usual reasons. He'll explain why soon. And then a terrifying and awful new video shows captors beating a hostage while shouting F Donald Trump and F white people. It happened in this country recently. We hear that disturbing footage up ahead. Well, as you know, a ton of journalists were completely disgraced after WikiLeaks revealed their throne sniffing with the Clinton campaign. Totally sycophantic, groveling. Well, now, rather than being drummed out of the business, they are back. Some are covering the Trump White House as if nothing ever happened. DC-based radio show host Chris Plant is here to discuss what exactly this means and how it happened. Chris, it's great to see you. So I'm in the gym today, and I look up on one of the screens, and there standing in front of Trump Tower with a microphone is John Harwood. And I thought, he can't be covering Trump. I mean, he was working on behalf of Hillary, but he is.
Well, you said that they disgraced themselves. They didn't disgrace themselves. They were padding their resumes. They were.
Come on.
They were found out in WikiLeaks. John Harwood, who's with CNBC, and he writes for the New York Times. All right.
Yeah.
And he's sending, he's trading emails with Podesta and talking. They're strategizing. He's warning him about Ben Carson, how he could be trouble in a general, and they're just kind of spitballing, and they're on the same team. It's quite clear that they have common goals.
And he's not even getting paid. He's doing this for free.
Well, that's right. And I was talking to somebody about this earlier and say, it's almost like the Soviet Union. But honestly, it's worse because in the Soviet Union, there was a penalty for not collaborating with the state. These guys do it quite voluntarily. They do it because they're on the team. And Harwood is far from alone. I mean, Glenn Thrush, who was with the Politico, was caught sending emails to the Clinton people for their prior approval.
Right.
He called himself in his own email a hack. He confessed, kind of lamenting perhaps that he's a hack. Now, he's no longer...
So now he's got to be selling aluminum siding in Boca Raton, right? He got out of the business.
Well, he was with the Politico, and I'll have you know he's no longer with the Politico.
Right, he got out of journalism, right?
Well, the New York Times saw all this, and they said, well, we like the cut of his jib. So they hired him away from the Politico, and now he's at the New York Times.
I don't believe you, Chris Plant. Come on now.
Oh, it's true. He's now at the New York Times, Glenn Thrush. It's considered to be a big promotion. You're at the New York Times, not Politico. It's a little sort of left-wing blog site here in Washington that once showed promise, but no more. And the New York Times saw Glenn Thrush collaborating behind the scenes surreptitiously with the Clinton campaign, and they hired him away from the Politico. So this is the realization of a lifetime of dreams.
But see, what I'm confused by, so let's say you're the New York Times, you're a liberal paper, okay? Yeah. And you want to also simultaneously pretend to be America's paper. So why wouldn't you just hire people who are surreptitiously liberal, secret liberals? Right. Why do you have to hire someone whom everybody knows has a political agenda? You're basically not trying anymore, are you?
Well, no, you're not. You're right. And it's kind of, look, the news media is now conspiring out in the open against the Trump administration, against the Republican Congress. Obstructionism is now a virtue. Remember when it was horrible, Mitch McConnell suggested that he wasn't going to support Barack Obama's agenda and the agenda of the opposing party. Now it's noble. It's a holy mission. And honestly, there's this thing. Have you caught on to this where the dreaded normalization? Don't normalize Trump. And members of the media are chastising one another if they even meet with Trump in an off-the-record session or meet with him or his people behind closed doors. They're being chastised by other journalists.
The same people who are sending campaign advice to the Hillary campaign.
That's exactly
are saying
right.
Don't get too close?
And they're not, absolutely. Mark Leibovich, again at the New York Times, sending his work to the Clinton people for their prior approval. They get editorial control over stories in the New York Times Magazine, the Politico. This isn't a conspiracy theory. We know all of this to be true.
I would say, just in the defense of one man, at least Mark Leibovich is really talented. The rest of these guys, John Harwood, has he ever broken a story? Has he ever written a sentence that stopped you in your tracks where you thought, oh, what a beautiful sentence? No, never.
No, he's awfully bland. And he's the one that during the debate suggested to Donald Trump that his candidacy was a comic book candidacy, mocking him openly on television.
Can I ask you, do you think the smartest people go into journalism, do you think the top 10% at MIT are rushing to our newsrooms?
It really is a problem. Who wants to be? Who wants to?
Pretty mediocre people.
And another part of the problem is the pipeline. And the pipeline at journalism schools, run by old, tired, has-been journalists for the most part, who are teaching the next generation of journalists that It's about the crusade. It's about the cause. It's about the fight.
That's
and
it right
and
there.
choose a team. Look, Maggie Haberman, also caught at the New York Times, political reporter, award-winning.
Yeah.
These are all award-winning journalists at the top of the industry in the United States of America, and they've all been proven to be hacks, and there's no consequence whatsoever. Now, if you ever caught one, which would never happen, collaborating with Trump behind the curtain like this, that would be the end of their career.
Yeah. I don't think we're getting those awards. But your award is in the good work that you do, and it is excellent. Thanks a lot.
Very kind. Thanks.
See you, Chris.
Thanks. Good to see you.
Well, an irate professor from California says Trump needs to stop being on Twitter. He needs to be banned from Twitter, actually, because of his views on global warming. That professor joins us next. And a really upsetting video of captors beating a hostage in Chicago while screaming F Donald Trump and racial epithets. It's a breaking story tonight. 4 are in custody. We'll have the latest. Well, a man was taken hostage in Chicago, bound, gagged, and savagely beaten, and all of it was broadcast live on Facebook. You can find the video online, and it's awful. In it, the captors yell F Donald Trump and F white people. Here's a clip.
What? Donald Trump, white people, what?
No. Goofy.
Yeah, man.
My sister that was trying to do.
Nigga, thinking it's slight.
Oh, my sister said this not funny, y'all.
Fortunately, the man is alive and recovering in a hospital. Some reports say he was disabled. Chicago police have 4 people in custody. So far, no charges have been filed, though. The victim is from one of Chicago's neighboring suburbs. This story is continuing to break, and we will follow it as we learn more. Well, another person is calling for Donald Trump to be kicked off Twitter, this time for a very different reason. Cal State Sacramento professor Joseph Palermo wrote in the Huffington Post, quote, if Trump and his cohort believe the science of global warming is bogus, then they should not be allowed to use the science of the internet for their Twitter accounts. Professor Palermo, who specializes in American history, joins us now. Professor, thanks a lot for coming on. So I'm assuming you were speaking not literally, but figuratively about Trump being banned from Twitter. I don't imagine, as a professor, you're in favor of banning people from expressing themselves. But what point were you trying to make?
Well, thank you for having me on so I could clarify it. I think what happened was I was visiting family in Wyoming, and they're very excited about the fossil fuel boom that they expect. And some of my relatives believe the Earth is 6,000 years old, and they were using technology to kind of prove that on the internet. And I thought it's kind of ironic for people who kind of denounce science in one area that they don't want to believe, but then they benefit from science in these other areas. And
well, I
the
hope
idea
you set them
was,
straight, those silly religious people who don't even have tenure or a cushy job like you do. Yeah,
they're my loved ones, and hey, I wish I had a cushy job. You're talking to a first person in his family to go to college, but listen, Tucker, let me just clarify. It was a rhetorical point that I accept the science of climate change,
right,
as does, I've been told, even Rex Tillerson does now, and the Pentagon does, and here I'm in the state capitol, the governor, the legislature. It wasn't uncontroversial for me to accept the science of climate change that 98% of the world scientists believe is true. No amount of ideology is going to change the physics of that. What I meant was it was misconstrued on some of these right-wing websites. They didn't really read it. I think they came up with some really catchy headlines to get clickbait, to get eyeballs.
We quoted it. No, I mean, look, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. I don't think you meant that the police should ban him from Twitter. Okay. But I am interested in the claims you've made about climate science, that it's settled and that 98% of worldwide scientists believe that. How do you know that? Are you a scientist, or have you polled other scientists, or where'd you get that figure?
Well, see, that's another one of those interesting kind of questions, is that wasn't what the blog was about. I was accused of advocating censorship.
You just said, I'm not, by the way, I'm not holding you to account for censorship. I'm asking about the claim you just made, that 98% of the world's scientists believe in something called climate science. Maybe you can explain what that is in a minute. But first, how do you know that 98% of the world's scientists believe what you believe?
Well, listen, Tucker, I didn't want to get into, are you a climate change denier, or a skeptic, or what is it? I mean, is that where you're at? Is that really what you're
The essence of science and of journalism is skepticism, because it seeks to get to the truth. And I'm merely asking you, as someone who just said, as a statement of fact, that 98% of the world's scientists agree with you, with whatever you believe. I'm wondering how you know that.
Oh, okay. Well, science is not just what I believe, Tucker. I mean, All you need to do.
But how do you know 98%
really
of the science? I mean, I often hear people say that. How do you know that? It's just a simple question. How do you know that?
Well, you know what? With your giant research team, you could send people out and find out about it. I was accused of advocating censorship of the President of the United States by a bunch of right-wing websites. Now, you tell me, could a professor in California censor the President of the United States? I mean, that's such an absurd idea.
Professor,
I'm not accusing you
of that. In fact, I opened by saying
your science.
I get it. I'm not accusing you of censorship. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm merely asking you to explain something you just said live on our show, which is that 98% of the scientists in the world agree with you. And the answer, of course, is you have no idea what climate science is, really, and you have no idea that 90% of the world's scientists agree with you, because that's unknowable, right?
Well, let me tell you. They predicted a long time ago that we would have high precipitation events and low precipitation events. Well, in California, we have both. We have droughts and wildfires, which are low precipitation events. We're having high precipitation events, which is like flooding and hurricanes and really strong weather.
These 98%
the climate
of scientists.
How about NOAA? You believe in NASA, NOAA, DARPA, the Pentagon? Really, Tucker, you're going to contradict the Pentagon? The Pentagon accepts climate change, climate science.
I'm merely saying you're practicing a species of religion where anybody who doesn't agree with what you believe is a heretic and should be penalized. No, because the essence of science is asking questions. And I asked you a very direct question, and you couldn't answer it because you have no idea what the answer is.
No, I can't.
But it doesn't stop you from running around talking about science, science this, science that. But you don't know.
Oh, so it is a debate about climate change. Okay, fine. But if you go to a doctor, you don't say, well, I need heart surgery, but how do you know how to do it? Well, guess what? There's trained scientists in NOAA and NASA, even the Pentagon, all over the world.
Questions. Now, you don't just say, I need my leg amputated. Okay, go ahead and say, well, why is that? And what exactly is wrong? Normal people ask questions, and they're not shouted down for it. What you're trying to do to me is call me names because I'm asking you questions that you can't answer.
I'm not calling you anything. I'm not calling you anything.
Climate
denier. No, I asked you if you are a skeptic or a denier. That's fine.
I'm a skeptic of everything, including your answers.
Okay.
Which don't make any sense.
When you get on a plane, are you skeptical of the pilot's trained to fly it?
Always,
I mean, I don't get it.
And if the pilot smells like booze, I'm happy to ask questions about whether he's fit to fly because I'm an adult who's autonomous and I can ask questions like an adult. But you're a member of a religious sect that can't deal with honest questions. And that's my only point. And I think you know that I'm right.
No, that's why I quoted Sean Otto in my piece. He wrote a book called The War on Science. You should read, Tucker. And it just came out in 2016, okay? Read.
All right,
Pick up
Professor,
a book
we're out of
and
time.
read about it. Try that.
I believe in reading.
Sometime.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah,
good to see you. Professor Palermo from California.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, Professor Palermo is not alone. In fact, liberals are so dominant in academia that some people say it is ruining college for everybody. Not just conservatives believe that, liberals believe that. One of those people is up next. Well, if you got kids in college and you saw them over Christmas, you may have concluded, boy, our nation's colleges are kind of liberal. How liberal? Well, one report says that liberal professors outnumber conservatives, in New England anyway, 28 to 1. 28 to 1. A new piece in Boston Magazine argues that this echo chamber, this left-wing echo chamber, is ruining college for everybody, conservatives and liberals alike. The author of that piece, Chris Sweeney, joins us now. Chris, it's great to see you tonight. I went to high school and college in New England, and it seemed pretty liberal, but 28 to 1. That's like Soviet level. Is that true?
Yeah, it's based on 25 years worth of data collected by the Higher Education Research Institute, and it was a professor by the name of Sam Abrams who looked into this and started crunching the numbers. And what he found was in New England, it's 28 to 1. And, in the rest of the country, it's nowhere near that. Out on the liberal West Coast, it was 6 to 1. Down south, it was 3 to 1. In the Midwest, it was 3 to 1. But in New England, it was 28 to 1. So
that's amazing. New England, of course, has a very high concentration of some of our most prestigious, I'm not sure best, but certainly most famous colleges and secondary schools for that matter. That doesn't happen by accident. If it's 28 to 1, there's something intentional going on. They're only hiring people who agree with them, do you think?
So, I tried to get into this a little bit in my reporting, and I polled a lot of people and interviewed dozens of people for this story, and I never could get there's no one explanation as to why this is such a phenomenon in New England. Some people said, it's self-selection. Liberals live where they work, so of course you're going to see this type of bubble. So, I think that was part of the problem. And everyone kind of has their own theories as to why it's this way. Some say it's a matter of history. If you go back centuries, you can look at, this has always been a progressive area, and, the purposes of a lot of the great universities were progressive causes driving them.
But isn't this the whole rationale for the diversity regimen the rest of us live under, that like-minded people tend to make bad decisions because there's no air in the room and you need someone who disagrees with you in order to keep you honest? Has no one at, say, Harvard or Dartmouth or Brown ever thought, well, maybe we should live by the rules we impose on others?
So I think it's starting to, this is an issue that's getting a lot of attention now, and I think professors are starting to become increasingly concerned about this and trying to figure out, why diversity of viewpoint is essentially non-existent in New England, and they're, looking for ways to address this.
I mean, it doesn't sound very fun anyway. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to be around all people who agreed with me on everything. I mean, that really would be kind of like looking in the mirror all day, and what's the fun of that? What's the other downside to this?
It really undermines the whole purpose of a college education, which are exorbitantly expensive nowadays. You're supposed to be exposed to conflicting viewpoints to learn how the world works. And, as one of my sources said, the world is not full of progressives. So when students are coming out of college and they're going to the workplace or whatever the next step is, you have to wonder whether they're actually prepared to step out of that bubble into the real world.
No, that's such a good point. So you wrote this piece, I think, for Boston Magazine, right?
I did, yes.
What kind of response did you get to it? I mean, the Hub has got to be one of the most liberal cities in the world. Did people egg your car, or what did people say when this piece came out?
So, surprising, we've gotten a ton of letters to the editor, and what we've noticed, though, is it's a lot of old-school liberals saying this is a major problem. I have gotten a few, nasty emails, but I was shocked at the number of people who have emailed us or written us saying, I am a bleeding heart liberal, 70 years old, and I am shocked to read this. So, it wasn't, it wasn't as vicious as I was anticipating, or at least it hasn't been so far.
A lot of the old school liberals are pretty honest, and they believe in free speech, and, they're not all bad. Actually, it's the young ones who are scary, I think. Chris, thanks a lot for joining us. That was really interesting, that piece.
Thank you.
Well, Trump's inauguration will be the first inauguration since marijuana possession was legalized in Washington, D.C. So will it be reefer madness? Looks like it. Details next. And Kimberly Guilfoyle, ladies and gentlemen, back due to popular demand in the Friend Zone tonight. Miss it at your peril. It's going to be excellent. Stay tuned. Well, here's something new. President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration will feature free marijuana. Thanks to a group of D.C. pot activists, the organization DCMJ will hand out thousands of free joints in DuPont Circle on inauguration morning, a little wake and bake here in the Capitol. Before walking to the National Mall, 4 minutes and 20 seconds into Trump's speech, participants will light up in an effort to convince the federal government to legalize pot, because that'll work for sure. The group's founder said the weed giveaway is as legal as long as it's done on D.C. property, but smoking on federal land could put protesters in handcuffs. 2 sets of laws, 1 city. That's how weird D.C. is. Time now for the Friend Zone. We invite one of our friends from within the building at Fox onto the show tonight. We're joined by one of our best friends, co-host of The Five, Kimberly Guilfoyle, ladies and gentlemen. KG, how are you?
Very good, Tucker. Very good. Doing well
thank
tonight.
You. So the thing about having you on, and why I hope you'll come on every night, is because every time you do, I learn something about you I didn't know, and I did not know this. Our producers found it. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was a famous dog case in San Francisco where a woman walking back to her apartment in Pacific Heights was killed by 2 dogs. They were owned by lawyers who got the dogs from a white supremacist who was in prison. You were involved in that case.
There I am. You see me right there at the counsel table.
That is crazy.
Yes, I was one of the prosecutors, and it's actually a precedent-setting case in the United States for second-degree implied malice murder, because I charged the 2 attorneys that owned the dogs with murder, brought it to the grand jury, and it was changed of venue down to Los Angeles. So I actually tried the case in front of one of the juries downtown where O.J. Simpson was tried, was able to get a second-degree murder conviction. I had a contract out on my life to have me killed because they didn't like the Puerto Rican lawyer that was prosecuting these people that were their lawyers, right? So they said, oh, no, we don't want her. So I stayed on the case, bulletproof vest, blocked plates, the whole deal, had security sleeping with me, in the room, and managed to survive and convict and persevere. And it's actually how I got my start in television, because after doing that, being head of the trial division and all kinds of things in my career at the LA DA's office and San Francisco, then I got the calls to come work in television. So
that is amazing. So what
survived
happened?
The Aryan Brotherhood.
It was everywhere. The guy was in Pelican Bay, as I remember.
That's correct, in a maximum security prison.
Yes.
Right, and so they were running a dog breeding business out of Pelican Bay, and then these two attorneys fell in love with this guy. No, I'm not making it up. They adopted him and took these two dogs, Bane and Hera, from this dog of war kennel. So it was unbelievable. And the two dogs were the ones responsible, obviously, for mauling the woman to death. It was a very sad case, very disturbing. She was a national lacrosse champion from St. Mary's, and then went back, to coach there. So Diane Whipple was her name. So that's a picture of me, some video you have from the courtroom. So it was a pretty amazing experience. I still think about it, to this day. I had the medical examiner on the stand for 4 hours because of all the extent of injuries, 76 discrete and defined areas of injury.
Oh, it was a horrible story. I remember that so well. I just completely forgot you were at the center of it.
Yeah.
How would you compare the intensity of trying a case like that, a murder case, to cable news?
Oh, my God. These days?
Yeah, these days.
These days. Well, I think it prepared me well for any kind of television cross-examine, life cross-examination. But it really did make me, I think, being a lawyer like that, trying all my cases without notes, and I tried everything up through death penalty cases, prepared me for television. It certainly prepared me for the friend zone, and, back and forth. And I say most especially for the 5, where we get after it, right?
It's true. Though no one goes to prison.
No one goes
Kimberly
to prison.
Guilfoyle, and most other people, very much including me, just been journalists their whole lives. She has lived a life.
Lived a life, yes.
KG, thanks a lot for that.
All right, Tucker, always a pleasure, my friend.
See ya. Well, coming up, we make you king for a day. We have that authority. That's next. And now, retrieve your crown because you are king for a day. If you had absolute power and you could do one thing to change or improve this country, what would it be? That's the question we ask every week. And every week we get great answers like this from DB, who wrote this. Give everyone a 4-day work week, making same amount, and volunteer for their favorite charity 1 day a week. In other words, become France, but without the charity. Tom Magdalena wrote, I would create moving sidewalks, just like at the airport, inside large cities and minimize inner-city vehicular traffic. Ah, yes. Wouldn't help the obesity crisis, though. Nancy Bumgardner writes, take all the calories out of carbs, so the more you eat, the skinnier you get. Huh. You could have a health-inducing Marlboro after. Super Dave wrote this, I'd like everyone else to get drunk and ask their opinions. Sounds like hell. And finally, Enlighten Up, clever name, tweeted this, have the perfect, brilliant 10 ambitious, funny, capable men fall in love, crazy love, with my daughter. Hashtag make me a grandma. Wow. You speak for every parent of every daughter in every household in this country. May it come true. Well, Today in Papasi returns tomorrow. What's the most pompous or ludicrous thing you have heard lately? Tweet us at Tucker Carlson. Email Tucker Carlson tonight, foxnews.com. But whatever you do, don't go away. Bill O'Reilly is next.